afternoon, colleagues. Thank you all for joining us again today for the second day of the South Africa Urban Resilience Emergency Preparedness and Response Workshop. I have the honor to be your host for today again. We have an exciting program ahead of us, and before we dive into it, I wanted to provide a quick technical overview about one of today's sessions. You may have noticed the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. For now, please do not click on it, but it is important that you know that this option will be used for one of the sessions today, so I wanted to give you a quick briefing about this. So for this session on preparing to become more resilient, which will be at 1:45 p.m., we will have a speaker from Colombia who will be speaking in Spanish, and for that we have organized simultaneous translation. Now, in terms of how this will work on Zoom, you can see the interpretation icon already appears on the menu at the bottom of the screen. So once the session starts, you will have to click on the icon and click on English to be able to hear the simultaneous interpretation in English. So I kindly ask you to please remember to do that when the session starts. Our moderator will make sure to let you know, and I will also be available in case you have any questions at the beginning of that specific session. Now, in terms of other housekeeping rules, just like yesterday, I would like to ask you to keep your microphones muted when you're listening to others. There will be opportunities for Q&A like yesterday at the end of each session, and you're again welcome to use the chat function or to raise your hand via the reaction icon to ask your question. With this, it is my pleasure to ask Ms. Anthea Stevens to take us through the recap of day one and the first session of the day. Anthea, over to you.
Thanks very much, Hugo. You can hear me, you can see me, I hope. Yeah, yes. Great. And good afternoon, colleagues. And thanks very much again for connecting to the second day of the workshop on urban resilience, emergency preparedness and response. I hope you will agree that yesterday we had some really interesting discussions and we were able to learn from each other, particularly around trying to surface what some of those common challenges related to emergency preparedness and response are in respective metros. I don't know if any, I was particularly struck by the inputs from Victoria Salinas from FEMA, which just really highlighted for me the importance of the kind of organizational transversal coordination across sectors, across departments, within departments, across spheres for effective emergency preparedness and response. And from the passing through the discussion groups that I did yesterday, it was very evident that those are, very common challenges in the South African context. I think the comment that she made that really struck me, which was that, the role of the national sphere is to support action at the local sphere. And as I said yesterday, that's something that is, an agenda of the National Treasury in the establishment of the City Support Program, and the platforms that we facilitate. And I was challenging, not to put thoughts or words in your head today, but in our conversations yesterday evening after the workshop closed, I was challenging the team, or challenging ourselves as the team in organizing this workshop, that we really want to establish or sort of catalyze a movement here where we have enough energy built through the engagements, the discussion, to be able to take forward a platform where we are able to facilitate, and with city leadership to facilitate engagement on common issues, common challenges that we need to address for better emergency preparedness and response. So my challenge here is to everyone here, is to use the session, to use the discussions to put your issues, your bugbears, and today we're going to start looking forward to the future, to solutions on the table, to really give us collectively, I'm not taking this on myself, but to give us collectively direction for how we can collectively intervene in this space to strengthen emergency preparedness and response. So we're looking for your energy and we're looking for your direction to guide us. And I'll leave it there, and I'll be moving through discussions and looking very much to hear that energy and that guidance. So with that, we're going to be building on those sessions, as I said, and diving more particularly into how to respond, how to strengthen emergency preparedness and response here. The agenda for today, if there's a slide we can get up, we'll be looking firstly at an overall objective of consolidating findings from day one and coming up with a list of gaps and best practices that could be developed to address emergency preparedness and response challenges. We're going to have a mixture of sessions, some with international best practice examples in the first part of the afternoon. And then again, as we did yesterday, we're going to go into the breakout sessions, which this time are going to be organized by sectoral thematic issues. So you won't be gathering as metros, but you'll be gathering on sector issues that you want to engage on. And then at the end of the day, we hope that we'll be able to clearly identify the gaps, as well as some ways to take forward responses to address these challenges. So without further ado, I would really like to introduce the first speaker for today, Dr. Sekar Kyriakosi. I hope I've got your name right, and please correct me if I haven't. Dr. Kyriakosi is the head of state emergency operations for Kerala in India, and he will provide a keynote speech to us on the importance of building back better after disaster, and is going to offer a unique perspective on the functioning of the EOC in India. Dr. Sekar, it's an absolute privilege to have you here with us today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Asante and Hugo. Colleagues here, listeners, I hope I can share my screen and then start on with the presentation if it's okay. I hope you can see my screen, right? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
And it's on full screen.
Thank you. Kerala is a state which is in the southern tip of India and is unique in a lot of different ways. We are, in that sense, very close to where South Africa is. You have Cape of Good Hope, we have Cape of Comorin. Now we have to be speaking about what does it mean to build back better, and this is particularly relevant to Kerala post-Kerala floods 2018, when Kerala faced significant catastrophe, and that was about 100 years after the previous such extreme event. In Kerala, we have the State Disaster Management Authority, which is the statutory body under the National Disaster Management Act, which is coordinating building back better, is also the agency which coordinates emergency response because it has the state-of-the-art emergency operations center. I have the dual responsibility of being the secretary to the authority, at the same time is also heading the state emergency operations center. What does Kerala, when we speak of Kerala, you also have to realize that there are a lot of uniques which is keeping it apart from the rest of the country. You can see where we are. We are at the southern tip of the country. It's a little long state with about 590 kilometers of coastline and about 38,000 square kilometers of land area. We have the highest human development index in the country. We have the best sex ratio. We have more women than men. We have the lowest population growth rate. We have the highest health index, highest literacy rate, and highest SDG index in the country. So when we speak of resilience and capability of the state in responding to disasters, you may also want to realize that we stand on a higher pedestal in terms of being able to cope with, but it doesn't mean that we are the best, and we don't claim that. We have our own challenges, and we are trying to solve those challenges. As everywhere, we are a democratic republic, and therefore we have to also see it in comparison with what is possible for the state and what is possible for the country. 2018 and 19, we had two major flood events. 2018 was mostly floods. Almost 80% of the state was flooded. In 2019, it was more of landslides, and the catastrophic damage was severe. The recent disasters that you can see that has happened in Kerala are also of epidemic in nature. We had the Nipah virus, which came out in 2018. We had floods and landslides in 18 and 19. We had COVID starting in 2020. We had again landslides in 2020. We had an air crash in 2020 and again landslides in 2021. 2022, so far through the monsoon, we are safe. What did we do after 2018? So initially we started off with a joint rapid damage needs assessment from September 2018. And then we went on to do India's first post-disaster need assessment. It was a comprehensive document which gave out a clear idea of how we were going to build back. And considering these two documents, we designed a program, a complete program called Rebuild Kerala Development Program, which is a perspective plan which looks forward to rebuilding Kerala over a 30-year period and has various nuances to it, which actually addresses different challenges that we face. The financials that were required for building back better came from a lot of different sources. We had crowdsource funding coming in. We had about 30 billion Indian rupees coming from the Chief Minister's Distress Relief Fund, which was benevolent support by people living abroad and across the country, who hails actually from Kerala. Other states supported us, other countries supported us. We got a 30 billion from the National Disaster Response Fund. We had multilateral agencies like World Bank, a significant donor to the states building back better. We also was the first state in the country to have a rupee-dominated masala bond. It was the first sub-sovereign bond that was issued anywhere from India onto the global market. And then we also had a flood rebuilding tax. So overall, we had about 310 billion Indian rupees to build back better, and that money is being used as we speak. The three pillars of resilience that we would insist on, as I told you, our stunts are unique, and that's because of the universal and free education, the universal and free healthcare, and the strong local governance that we have. So anything and everything that you might see after the slide is because of these three pillars. And this is what I would urge everybody in the world to invest on, whether it's emergency preparedness or resilience building in the long term. These are the three pillars on which we have to stand. We started with Sendai Target 5. So we started preparing the local government disaster management plans. We have 1,034 local governments, which covers 3.8 crore people. And all this panchayats, municipalities, and city corporations prepared their local government disaster management plan. So that was the first initiative. We also downscaled the climate change information available in public domain to local governments and provided them with sufficient input to tell them that this is where the future is going to take them. We also translated that into flood return probabilities and kind of considered what was a historic scenario and what was the 10-year or up to 500-year return probability scenarios, and how much area is getting further inundated with in an RCP 8.5 scenario, worst case scenario. We also prepared a series of anticipatory action plans and guidelines. We call them the orange books. So we have a number of them for heat action, for lightning actions, for monsoon preparedness and response. All these are prepared in local lingua, in Malayalam, the local language, and is communicated to various departments and public so that they are prepared to cope with what is in stock for them. These documents are kind of amended and updated as and when required. Particularly the Orange Book for monsoon preparedness is updated every year. Now we established a very comprehensive warning system which goes all the way to sirens and strobe lights. For last mile connectivity, we have location-based messaging system. It's all operated out of a 22,000 square feet State Emergency Operations Center, which is the headquarters of the State Disaster Management Authority. And we synthesize all this information in this multidisciplinary fusion center, wherein departments provide their staffing. We also have a huge technical crew here, which analyzes data that falls, that gets fed into our server from different national agencies and observatory systems. So at the end of the day, every day at 1 o'clock, we issue warnings and forecasts for the next 5 days, which includes weather warnings, reservoir levels, river flow levels, lightning alerts. All these things are regularly monitored and updated in public domain and also issued as location-based messages as and when required, and sirens and stoplights are hooted when there is a real emergency. We have a huge harnessing of human spirit, and numerous volunteers are equipped across the state. 3.5 lakh volunteers in the first directorate of volunteerism in the country, 10,000 civil defense volunteers, and when the world has Batman, Iron Man, we have our fishermen, we have local government emergency response teams. So they are all equipped and trained to respond to such catastrophic damages, and all this started kind of gaining impetus post 2018. When we speak of building back better, we also didn't just invest in emergency response, but we also facilitated to the community in terms of coastal protection. We made fishing harbors more resilient. We ensured that our coastline is protected. Resilient housing was designed and funding was provided to people who were affected to build back better. Fishermen housing, you can see. Lowland housing, a separate design is offered and support is given to build back better. If we go to schools, Kerala, as you know, has the highest education in the country and literacy level in the country, and over 100 schools were made resilient and also were converted into center of excellence with the funding that we had from the post-disaster 2018 scenario. We also invested in going green. So we have rubber check dams that are replacing the traditional check dam designs. We have prefabricated buildings. What you see on the screen, there is actually a hospital, a 100-bed hospital built totally of prefabricated material. We have solar panels deployed in the dams. We also have incentivization for green designs and building. The public transport is moving into go green. We have public transport buses which are electric. Our enforcement agencies have moved on to electric vehicles. What you see is the motor vehicles department's fleet of vehicles which are used for enforcement of motor vehicles law. 500 charging stations are already deployed, and we also have one of the world's first complete green airport which runs only on solar power in Cochin, which also won the UN Championship of Earth Prize in 2018. We have a program for more room for rivers, which is adapted from the Dutch model. The government of Netherlands supports us extensively in getting this going, particularly on the technical side. Rivers, streams, and rivulets are all kind of desilted. Many rivers are reclaimed. Some of these rivers stopped flowing earlier, and they are being reclaimed and they have started flowing. There's also a program on cool urbanscapes. We have 1,261 Miyawaki forests spread over 454 acres of land. We have an incentivization scheme for implementing cool roofs. These are some of the pictures of the Miyawaki forest that you would see in Trivandrum city, where I speak to you from. And then we also not only did all this, we also created a risk-informed master plans guidelines. This is the new norm. All the master plans of the cities and municipalities are going into risk-informed master plans, not anymore the traditional master planning process. We also have an incentivization scheme under the P4R actions of the World Bank, wherein we have a DCAT tool where we track all the disaster and climate actions that are happening at the local government level. For high-risk local governments, we provide them with state disaster mitigation fund to kind of be more resilient. For those local governments which actually invest suo moto in good climate adaptation actions, we also provide them with financial incentives. So to conclude, every disaster is an opportunity to become more resilient. If resilience building is what is aimed at, then empowering local governments is the key to it. That's where we succeeded, and that's where we think we have to continue investing. Technology is also social technology and harnessing human spirit. That's something that we can't be devoid of in this era of climate change. And inclusive DRR is the key to resilience and not just technology. So what you see as emergency preparedness in the state is not because that we have a huge lot of sophisticated systems, but we have a huge lot of human resource which is dedicatedly groomed for managing emergencies and planning for anticipation and planning anticipatory actions that the state has to take to be more resilient. So with this, I conclude. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sakar, for that very, very interesting presentation. I was intrigued about, the very comprehensive efforts that, that have been undertaken in Kerala since the devastating floods, the lessons and how you overcame these challenges. I have questions, and I know we don't have much time for questions, but I'm going to throw one in, just if I can abuse my chair's prerogative to the irritation of my colleagues, and apologies for that. And I do want to ask meeting participants, and Dr. Sakar, if you're able to, if you have the time to entertain or respond to one or two questions in the chat line, if there are any that come in, if you could stay for an extra minute or two to do that. My question is around, what leadership, it strikes me that leadership is so critical in mobilizing a comprehensive response. And I'd love to know a little bit more about that, where the leadership agency came from for a response that really kind of enabled you to, in terms of guidelines, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of, you spoke about harnessing the human spirit, drawing on the science, the modeling, to really, engage in a Build Back Better agenda. It strikes me that this requires significant leadership and significant mobilization, again, across whole of society, across whole of government, in a sense. So would love just a short reflection from you on the enablers of this Build Back Better agenda. Thank you very much.
Well, if we have to answer that question, it's also about how institutionalization of disaster management in Kerala is. We started as Kerala State Disaster Management Authority became equipped with a certain number of technical crew from 2012. So when it was 2018, we already had a critical mass who were already having a certain set of anticipatory actions planned out, a certain set of footprint in the state budget. The State Disaster Management Authority is headed by none other than the Chief Minister of the state. And he was very thorough with what he wanted to do with the authority and how he wanted to take that leadership role of the State Disaster Management Authority, being a coordinating agency to take it forward. So when 2018 floods came, there was already an institutional mechanism down the way, all up to the districts, wherein the district collectors had disaster management authorities who had supporting technical crew. The state had a disaster management authority as an entity and had certain financial provisions available, and the chief minister took the mantle. He started off with talking to people every day over press conference. Everything that the State Disaster Management Authority had as its wish list was taken on board by the Honorable Chief Minister and presented to the public, and he ensured that many of them becomes government policies for further implementation in the state. For example, post 2018, we spoke about vulnerability linked relocation plan. This was India's first vulnerability linked relocation plan, where we said retreat is a norm, which became a norm only by IPCC's AR6 report. But we started in 2018. This was proposed, and he immediately understood the reason for why we were saying that at some places we need to retreat. So it became a vulnerability linked relocation plan wherein state money was put in. The building that you saw, the 22,000 square feet building that you saw, was invested by the state to build. We had no external funding coming in. The state said, yes, we want a hub of emergency operations. We want a place where disaster management is planned for, wherein long-term actions are thought about, resilience building is coordinated. So all this came from the political executive, which realized that it is essential to invest in disaster management. And currently we are one of the best funded departments in the state in terms of our ability to mobilize, in terms of our ability to finance mitigation projects of different departments, and our ability to coordinate and utilize effectively the central and the state resources which are available for disaster management. So that's primarily because our political executive is thorough and well aware of why they need to invest in it. And this is also owing to the fact that we had traditionally, as a state, invested in the three pillars, that being education, healthcare, and local governance. So at the last mile, we have people's representative. For every 2,000, 3,000 people, we have one elected representative who is available to take that leadership and move and mobilize people at that grassroots. So that's a simple
but significant. You know, it speaks to a lot of strength and capacity in the system. So thanks for that response. Dr. Sakau, we must move on, but your session is set up and your input has set us up really well for the next set of speakers on the topic for today. Just again, to thank you from my side, from the National Treasury side in South Africa, for your time and input. And if you are able to respond to any questions in the chat, I can see one there, that'd be great. But thank you again very much. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Eric Dixon, who's Senior Urban Development and Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the World Bank. Eric leads the World Bank support to the City Support Program and is going to be taking over and moderating the next session. Thanks, Eric, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Anthea. And just to confirm that you can hear me well?
Yes, we can.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you so much to our distinguished speaker from Kerala for the fascinating presentation. I think, as you said, Anthea, it really does lead us very well into this next session on preparing to become more resilient. It is very intentional, the steps that are taken as described by metros and by governments all over the world in order to build towards being more resilient. And we have two fascinating cases today that we're going to be hearing from. We have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Guillermo Escobar, who is the Director General for the District Institute for Risk Management and Climate Change out of Bogota, Colombia. So you all will have heard that Hugo at the start did mention the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. I would invite participants to now begin making use of that button, clicking on the interpretation button and then selecting English, and you will be brought through to the English translation for Mr. Escobar's presentation, which will be focusing on the effective use of hazard and risk information, and including working across sectoral boundaries, which we touched on yesterday, and transforming that into information that is used for effective early warning and preparedness campaigns, training, and capacity building. Later on, we have the privilege of being joined by Gareth Morgan, the Executive Director for Future Planning and Resilience at the City of Cape Town. We had also intended that the Executive Director for Water, Mike Webster, would join us, but due to some unforeseen circumstances, Gareth has kindly agreed to come in and share his reflections on the experience from the city and what was done to prepare for their drought response that many of us are very aware of, and we are looking forward to having those reflections. And as a heads up, given the current and emerging drought situation in Nelson Mandela Bay, I would like to invite Matthew Hill from Nelson Mandela Bay delegation to listen in and to provide some reflections based on what you hear from these speakers, based on what's happening today in Nelson Mandela Bay. So with that, allow me just to kick us off. Guillermo Escobar is a civil engineer and he holds degrees from Universidad Santo Tomás.
Guillermo Escobar es graduado de la Universidad de Santo Tomás, ingeniero en gestión de riesgos de desastres.
With expertise in formulating, applying public policies regarding adaptation to climate change, analysis of natural and man-made hazards, and emergency coordination. He has more than 20 years of experience in the public and private sector in areas relating to formulation, execution, management, and supervision of infrastructure projects, and as well as informed land use planning, taking into account risk considerations. He has served as the Deputy Director of Emergency Management at the National Disaster Risk Management Unit in Colombia, and also Deputy Manager of Bogota's Transport Terminal, among other roles. So we are very pleased to have Guillermo with us here today. And Guillermo, I will be presenting or showing the slides from my side, but you can be speaking in Spanish in the translation. So with that, I will begin sharing my screen, and thank you all very much for joining us today. And Anthea, if I could just request confirmation, or Hugo, that you can see the screen.
We can see it.
Sí, ahí estamos, Eric. Muy buen día.
Buenos días, Guillermo, y muchas gracias por haber reunido con nosotros. Over to you, Guillermo.
Bien, buen día desde Colombia.
Well, good morning. Well, good day from Colombia to everyone. And I hope that this presentation is of interest to you and applicable to the conditions that you have in your territories. Well, from Bogota,
De fortalecimiento en la capacidad de respuesta.
strengthen our capacity to respond in the comprehensive management of risk regarding threats that the city of Bogota has. We have to remember that Bogota is the capital of Colombia with over 8 million inhabitants and a very interesting development process in different conditions. And well, my presentation is going to be focused on the conditions that have evolved in the capital district. Next, please. Bogota has 6 threats, main threats, and they have to do with conditions that can impact the inhabitants of the capital district. And they are basically listed here, and they refer to a condition of general protection against the situations that may arise in the district. And these threats are basically refer to flash floods or sudden increases of bodies of water. We have around 50 rivers and creeks, and they can at some point present a situation of affectation to the community. The next threat that we have considered in all these processes is that in the eastern hills of our society and 30% of the territory that corresponds to rural, there could be forest fires. Floods are absolutely common in the capital district of Bogota, especially during the 2 rainy seasons that we have throughout the year. And that undoubtedly can generate affectation because of puddling or because of conditions of insufficient drainage systems, especially because when we're influenced by climate components such as La Niña events that increase rainfall in the capital and in the entire country, leading to mass movements or landslides, where many people that are in
Socioeconómicas han tenido que construir allí sus viviendas.
are located, or that because of their socioeconomic situation have had to build their houses there. Seismic movements or earthquakes are also an issue in the capital district, and we've had to prepare ourselves to reduce that condition of vulnerability through programs and projects that generate a condition that is adequate enough for both attention as well as reduction of this condition that can affect the population. And finally, technological threats. Bogota has some zones of the capital that carry out industrial activities, and we have to prepare to be able to respond to this condition. And what we've been working on is on the reduction of the physical vulnerability, environmental vulnerability, economic conditions that can be impacted, political decision-making, the organizational component, institutional, and also the educational and community condition. And how do we do it in the district? We do it through 2 specific instruments. One corresponds to here, which is the District Institute for Risk Management and Climate Change, that corresponds to an entity that generates guidelines and public policies for risk management, disaster risk management and climate change adaptation. And we have a financial institution that manages the risk and corresponds to a fund that collects important resources from our Secretariat of Treasury, and that basically corresponds to an annual and accruable transfer of 5% of the current income that the city has. This is Fondiger, and this instrument has existed for years now, approximately since 1988 to date. And it served as an example so that the country could generate the constitution for funds for risk management and response to emergencies in the country. In this slide, you can see that Bogota has around 157 areas that are prone to mass movements and that compose all the six or bring together all these threats that I mentioned a few minutes ago. And how do we coordinate the district? The district has 15 secretariats, district secretariats, and around 62 institutions to be able to respond to situations of emergency. In different areas, we also have entities such as Red Cross, the fire department, and other institutions that are part of the operation. But and it generates this whole condition and for risk management, along with all the other conditions that can result from the coordination of these 15 secretariats that you see on the right of the screen, and of the 62 entities that make it up. Next slide, please. In this slide, what we see basically corresponds to how many events we see annually in the capital district in different situations. We have 11,355 events that have occurred between 2020 and 2022 with an average of 3,500 events, 3,800 a year, and that are distributed in the 20 locations in which the territory of the capital district is divided. The most frequent ones are the ones that are associated to the rainy season, landslides, deficiency in the sewage system of the city, a process that is related to the component.
Sorry, can we put on slide mode because the view is very, very small. Sorry for interruption.
Ok, si me ayudas, Eric, por favor.
Okay, Eric, can you please help me with that? Or do you want me to share my screen?
Participants, if that slide is looking very small, I'll just try and adjust the view so that it is larger. Hugo, are you able to guide me on where I need to do that?
I believe one of the icons at the bottom, you will see full screen. Or if you go to the PowerPoint itself, you will be able to display it as
okay. Thank you. Just one moment while I reshare the presentation, please. Is that any larger?
Eric, you need to flip your screens. I think you've got an external monitor, and there's we're seeing, try that. No.
Okay.
So we're seeing the presentation view, not the.
Okay, I'm just struggling with that, Anthea. Sorry for the delay here.
If you want, Eric, I have the slides. I can display them.
Great, thank you very much. I'll stop sharing over to you, Hugo. Thank you.
Is it better now?
Perfecto, Hugo, gracias.
Perfect, thank you.
Perfect, Hugo, thank you.
Yeah, that's actually perfect.
Estamos en la siguiente diapositiva, Hugo, por favor.
We're on the next slide, Hugo, please.
Hugo, if you could go to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
Okay, very well. So, as I was saying, basically Bogota that has 20 locations, 20 territories that have their own organization and their local conditions, risk management with coordination from us, from eThekwini, has presented a series of situations that correspond to an annual average of 3,800 events of different nature. And the most relevant ones are the ones that we see during the different rainy seasons. And as I mentioned, we have two, one that goes from March to June and another one from September to December approximately, where there's an increase in the situations of emergency and interinstitutional coordination due to landslides, flash floods, trees that break down, that fall because of problems with our sewer systems that lead to this response to emergencies in the territory. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please, Hugo.
And for this, we have to meet a series of conditions for community preparedness in order to reduce this condition of vulnerability. And so we have developed different campaigns. In Bogota, specifically, we have one, which is the first one that you see and that corresponds to how residential compounds, shopping malls, where there are escalators, electric doors, elevators, each one of the owners, managers, and whoever generates this condition of construction and operation of these elements should guarantee adequate maintenance in an annual way. We carry out a verification process prior to the campaigns in each one of these places. The second one corresponds to campaigns during the rainy season that, as I mentioned, is where we see greater conditions of emergency. So to each inhabitant, each population, each locality, we reach them not only through graphic material, but through radio campaigns so that they can reduce their vulnerability, to do maintenance of their drainage systems, their rooftops, etc. When we have rain, that corresponds to the mid part of the year, June, August, and also towards January and February, which is also where we have forest fires. That's where we have less rain, and we carry out these public information campaigns so that they could know what they should and should not do in these areas and therefore avoid forest fires. In Bogota, as with any other capital, there's also crowding because of concerts or meetings of different nature that make the population come to these places. So we have to prepare ourselves. So if there is a situation, we can adequately assist the population that comes to these areas. And this requires important coordination so that the situations that may eventually arise, such as mass assistance of patients, an evacuation process, or to avoid stampedes because of a situation, this has to be responded to in coordination with the different institutions that are present there. The earthquake campaign has several components. The first one is to develop awareness in the community so that they can report if they've felt a seismic movement that can generate alerts, and finally attention by the operational authorities. And our fundamental campaign. Each year, during the second week of October, we perform a district drill for community preparedness. And in recent years, as you can see in the green block, an important participation by the population, 3,168,000 participants in 2020 and 3,863,449 participants, where we teach them about family emergency plans, evacuation plans, how they can be prepared for these situations. In 2020, since the whole population was in lockdown in our homes, we had to verify and make sure if we had emergency kits, first aid kits, water, clothing, some basic elements that you can surely verify on our website, www.eThekwini, And there you have the whole list. And with these conditions, we started to prepare the community to have a much more resilient city. And finally, last slide, please.
Guillermo, if I could just ask you to conclude rather quickly so we can move to Gareth. Si podrías acabar la presentación. Muchas gracias.
Sí, ya con esta
Yes, with this last slide, I will finish. And it's basically our program of assistance to each one of the locations in the 20 locations that our territory is divided into, with social and community participation is fundamental. We have a process to give the communities the tools so that they can initially respond to the emergencies that may occur, and this whole process that is established by our regulations in Colombia, in which risk management is public, private, and community. All our information is in ier.gov.co. We'll place this in the chat box so that you can remember it. And if we could provide advisory accompaniment, we will be glad to do it from Bogota.
Guillermo, thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias for this very, very rich presentation. We greatly appreciate it. And having worked in Colombia for many years, and with Bogota specifically, I can speak to the very vast experience that Colombia has, that Bogota has, that can apply here in South Africa. I mean, I think just taking a quick few notes for our South African colleague, I mean, 11,000 events that they've had to deal with in a 3-year period. Absolutely massive citywide simulations with very wide ranging participation of the populace. Very, very impressive. But I think importantly, and I think this is a point that perhaps Gareth might touch on, is the public information campaigns of multiple hazards. I think this continuous outreach, the continual learning that we spoke about yesterday, absolutely critical. And I have little doubt that your reference, Guillermo, to the Fonditer, the financial mechanism, the fund that is established by the city's treasury, will generate a lot of interest, and we will be moving into discussions on risk financing later today in the breakout and tomorrow. Now, so Guillermo, thank you so much. And with that, and before we move to questions and answers, I would like to take the opportunity of inviting Gareth Morgan to join us. As mentioned, he is the Executive Director for Future Planning.
Es el director ejecutivo en la ciudad de Cape Town.
Roles in the strategic response to both the Cape Town drought and, importantly, to the most recent COVID-19 pandemic. He holds a master's degree in environmental change and management from Oxford, where he attended as a Rhodes Scholar. He's also a Tutu Fellow and an Aspen Fellow. And prior to joining the city, he was a member of Parliament for 9 years, where his focus was on the legislative reform for water and climate change. Gareth, we're very pleased to have you here, and over to you. Gareth, are you with us?
Hello, colleagues. Gareth Morgan here. Can you hear me, Eric?
Yes, I can hear you, Gareth. We cannot see you yet. There you are.
Could you please unmute yourself, Mr. Morgan? We cannot hear you.
Okay, is that better? Hold on.
So perhaps, Gareth, as you're looking at the audio connection, there was 3 points that I think are relevant for the discussion today that we hope to reflect on. The first was on the multi-agency and multi-sectoral preparedness in Cape Town. Importantly, the changes that have been introduced since the drought and how the city is currently operating, and then a future look as to, based on your learning, what is the city doing in case such a drought comes back in the future? So over to you. Thank you.
Excuse me, Eric, this is Natalia. I just would like to just pause a little bit. So the translation to Spanish right now is not working, and I want to make sure we the other panelists can listen to the presentation also of Mr. Gareth. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I just want to make sure that we troubleshoot this for a second.
Thank you for the update, Natalia.
Yeah, Eric, also I am here, but my camera wasn't working unexpectedly. I was trying to connect through another way. So if you don't mind, I'm going
Aquí
to...
mi cámara no estaba funcionando, así
This is the clearest way to deliver the message. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine, Gareth. Thank you very much. And
Okay.
I think Natalia will, for purposes of moving the meeting along, we can also take some notes and brief Guillermo bilaterally. So Gareth, over to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for the logistical problems there, colleagues. So let me go back to the days of day 0 and the drought in Cape Town.
día 0 y la sequía en Cape Town.
And which we still live with the consequences today. It's worth painting a little bit of a picture for those colleagues who may not be entirely familiar with the event in Cape Town. But from 2016 to 2018, there was an abnormally low rainfall event in Cape Town. By 2017, certainly by late May of 2017, which should normally be about 2 months into Cape Town's rainy season, which runs from approximately April to October each year, it was very evident that the situation had changed. The low rainfalls of 2016 were being repeated in 2017. And in fact, little did we know in May that the rainfall would be exceptionally low. Certainly the lowest rainfall in 2017 was the lowest in many decades. So by May 2017, we were confronted with a very, very extreme event. Of course, a city like Cape Town is a city that has a strong relationship with water. And like any city, we have procedures for drought events and we have protocols for drought events. But this particular drought was on the far edges of the modeling of our water system. And we're going to ask ourselves some very serious questions. Were we going to live in hope that rainfall would somewhat recover in 2017? Or were we looking at an event which could potentially result in Cape Town running out of water, at least for our reticulation purposes, or very close to running out of water? We chose to augment our response in May 2017 beyond the regular protocols of drought management. Of course, curtailment of water usage is vitally important, and we had been doing that for several months already, but we had to add several other issues. But to get to multi-level governance, which is a key part of the question I've been asked by Eric, the Western Cape Water Supply System is the governance method that controls the supply of bulk water from dams to the City of Cape Town metropolitan area. At least 95% of Cape Town's water comes from 6 large dams and a smaller number of other dams into our system. We're the dominant user in the Western Cape Water Supply System, which also includes as stakeholders the National Department of Water, Commercial Agriculture, and 2 smaller municipalities on our boundaries. So we do have a system of governance that exists, and we must mention that system of governance because it's been in place for many, many, many years. That system provides the allocations to the users in the system, including ourselves, and it has its own governance process. However, when thinking through this disaster, which is what we call a slow-moving shock event, we had that as one stakeholder, and so in terms of our multi-level governance, we had to conclude very, very quickly that the people of Cape Town were the dominant stakeholder as well. We had to go into a contract with the people of Cape Town in order to help Cape Town navigate through the drought. So we were receiving our allocation from the Western Cape Water Supply System. That was a given, and that was changed on occasion. And so there's not much need to focus too much on that system for the purposes of this story going forward. Multi-level governance here really does mean the combination of the spheres of government and the people of Cape Town.
las personas de Cape Town.
And if I think back at it now, a mistake we made as the city of Cape Town, and it's always important to reference mistakes for the purposes of learning, is that in that period of early 2017, around about March, April, as it was, we were starting to realize that this was a different event to what we were used to. The government of the city of Cape Town tried to do too much itself. In other words, we thought we could solve this problem. And little did we know that that was the wrong way to approach it. And we took an approach at that stage, which was, I would argue, quite forceful. We berated high water users. It wasn't an approach which provided a social contract between ourselves and the users in the system. As the situation deteriorated, we had to get a lot more nuanced. And we understood that the pathway to protection of our water supply under a low rainfall scenario was to contract with the people of Cape Town. And that's where I include this part of multi-level governance. Our task was to effectively drive consumption down to approximately 50% of water usage compared to the pre-drought figure. As far as we can understand, nobody has ever achieved such a feat in the world. And you know, the good part of the end part of the story is that we did achieve that. We drove consumption down to 50% of normal water usage. But in order to do that, we had to obviously get citizens and water users to become actively part of the water system. Now, I know everyone on the call makes the assumption that everyone is part of the water system. Yes, I agree. But not all Cape Townians actively thought about the water cycle, how it worked and what they could do. And so using this event is an incredible event for the purposes of water literacy in Cape Town. So besides water tariff increases in order to disincentivize high water usage, communications was really a key driver. We were exceptionally creative with our communications. We used multiple stakeholder partners from business, civil societies in order to join us in telling the story of water usage and the risk. We used influencers and opinion makers. We joined with corporates, big buildings as well, to make sure that all of our messaging was the same. We open sourced all of our communications to make sure that anyone could use our communications in their own buildings, electronic billboards. We used data very, very well. We had to understand, we had to build trust in a low trust environment. You know, citizens often are quite distrustful of government. We had to build trust. And one of the ways of doing that was sharing data all the time, at least on a weekly basis. We would engage citizens with our water dashboard. We would say, this is what this means. If we can pull back, if we can save more, this is how we extend the life of our dams. And this became part of the water literacy of Cape Town. People spoke about this. We published maps of communities and put little green dots on the roofs of all the houses on the maps to show people who were achieving their water saving goals. If you never had a green dot, it meant that you were not saving. So we used peer pressure in community groups and within roads and streets in order to ensure that people were putting pressure on each other as well. We also then, of course, had to work out what to do in an absolute worst case scenario. What would happen if Cape Town actually ran out of water? And we put the figure at 13.5%. If our dams went to 13.5%, that was the point where we were going to turn the reticulation system off. And we had to work out how we would deliver water to people in that situation. There's another intersection of multi-sectional governance. This becomes very much the domain of the explicit disaster risk management system, inclusive of the city government, our provincial government, as well as the South African police services and the army. And so everyone had to be in on the plan for the worst case scenario. So we mapped the entire system of the city. We looked at our available water points out of taps, and we designed a system of pods, which our intention was to deliver water in a constrained way to people of Cape Town.
Cómo podríamos entregar agua.
The part of the story which everyone needs to know is that we never actually had to do this. And thankfully we didn't. So to the extent that we could test it in real life, and to the extent that it would work in practice, I don't know. However, I am going to put in the chat in a moment a journal article that we wrote up on this entire process, including the logistics of it, the maps, and everything, so that people who want to learn from our very deep work into plotting a disaster system for a lack of water, they may learn from it. But around this time, the day zero concept emerged, day zero being how many days until we run out of water. A bit of contestation about who came up with that term, but the city of Cape Town seized on that term in order to activate the minds of our citizens, particularly in late 2017 when we were not quite reaching our goals yet. The entire comms campaign became about day zero. It activated the minds of our citizens. We did tests of our pod systems under worst case scenario because we wanted to genuinely see if we could do this. And so we modeled it with real people doing walkthroughs and cars and all of that, but we also took photos of it. Photos to show the people of Cape Town what they would have to do if we ran out of water. Controversial, I know, but it did result considerably in driving down water consumption to that goal that we needed to get in early 2018. And so we involved all of our partners in that, disaster and risk management services, Metro Police, and all of those simulations. And, you know, as the story goes, we never had to use it. In early 2018, we had driven water down to 50%. Our pressure management system was also a big part of driving consumption down, making sure that we had relaxed pressure in the system to minimize the loss of water through leaks. And there was some opportunistic rain earlier than we thought would come, which was a significant bonus. And there was a water transfer from an agricultural scheme as well. So we started to grow out of the crisis from about March 2018, having learned so many lessons about how to operate under an extreme drought crisis. And we know we've written those up in dozens of ways. I'm also going to put in the chat, colleagues, in a moment, our drought library for everyone to have a look at. We have over 100 hours of interviews that we did with decision makers in the drought. Unedited for any user around the world to be able to see why we were doing things, how we made it in it. And we have intentionally unedited those videos because we have acknowledged in Cape Town that there are multiple stories of what happened in the drought and that there were lots of stakeholders who contributed. And that's really my dominant message here. In these types of crises, colleagues, there's a role for government and perhaps the leadership role. But these situations are not solved without partnerships with organizations, people, your citizens, and of course, other spheres of government. There is no ways we would have got through the Day Zero event without extensive partnering, something which we were reluctant to do at the start, but which we had become very good at by the time this event passed. Thank you, Eric. Back to you.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much, Gareth, for walking us through that very rich narrative of that massive challenge that Cape Town faced. Indeed, I mean, we all know it made headlines globally. I think a couple of things really jump at me. You know, in the number of years that I've been working in South Africa, we talk about the spheres of government and from national, provincial, and local. But what's very interesting is that in your intervention today, you really took that down one more level to focus on the citizenry and the social contract. And I think that is something that is very, very important. And linking back to work that we did in Colombia, gosh, nearly 12 years ago, when we were looking at assessing the perceptions of roles and responsibilities around disaster risk management, it was often the citizenry that said, well, that's the government's job. And I think that the point that you've made today is extremely important, that communicating, engaging, building trust through data is absolutely critical. And that enabled the city, as you said, to avoid that 13.5% dam depletion that was your trigger point. And for colleagues, Gareth mentioned a couple of times the pods, just to clarify, that is a point of distribution for those that might not know that acronym. But Gareth, thank you very, very much for that presentation, for the article that you've mentioned and now put into the chat, which is extremely interesting. I do encourage all
en el chat
to take a look at that. Now, if I could, as I'd mentioned, invite Matthew Hill from Nelson Mandela Bay. We are running quite behind schedule, so if you could just perhaps provide a a 1-minute reaction to the presentations that you've heard from Guillermo Escobar in Colombia and from Gareth Morgan in Cape Town as it relates to what is happening today in your metro. Matthew, if I could invite you to come in. Thank you.
Hi, good day. Interesting that I've been selected, but I'm happy to give my input and feedback. So on the Colombia presentation, what was most evident was the need for information. With information, you can respond quickly, you can notify the public timeously, and for that, perhaps Port Elizabeth or NMBM is a bit behind. Our information is more on a daily basis, and I see room for improvement there, just so we can respond quicker. On the City of Cape Town presentation, now we've worked extensively with City of Cape Town on our droughts, being in the same social, economic, and political sphere as us. Lessons learned from them have been essential to the strategy we've used to respond. And in fact, some of their engineers have been brought through to the NDMC to work with us on how to resolve the issue. So, you know, as I said yesterday during our workshops, it's not just about looking at how can I respond now, but it's essential to look on how did I respond and learn from the past. And those lessons that Cape Town have learned, especially on, as you mentioned as well, their social contract, on their aggressive and yet open source communication strategy, and the way they managed to sort of create a, not panic, but enough of a social contract that people were kickstarted into action and took ownership of this as a city, as the citizens, as opposed to the traditional, which is leave it to the government engineers. They must solve this problem. This is their issue. And thank you for the opportunity to provide feedback.
Thanks very much, Matthew, for jumping in. We really do appreciate it. And obviously, you know, we are, I think, as a collective group here to also be able to help as Nelson Mandela Bay navigates the potential drought. But I think the point that you made, and one that I also wanted to reflect on, Gareth, you were very forthcoming about the learning from mistakes. And indeed, that was something that Victoria Salinas from FEMA mentioned yesterday, that this continual process of learning is critical. And I think that the other point that you echoed that Victoria made, Gareth, was that collaboration outside of the City of Cape Town across multiple stakeholders was really critical. And yesterday, Victoria Salinas really emphasized that you don't need to be an expert in everything, but you need to be a good coordinator. And I think that also really came through in your intervention. So thank you very much, Guillermo. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Matthew, for this. I would like to open the floor just for one, maximum two, because of the timing, questions from participants. I'm not able to see hands. So Hugo, if you're able to assist, or of course, if you're able to put your question into the chat, we would ask the presenters to be able just to respond to those. Hugo, are there any hands that are up with questions from our Metro delegations?
At the moment, I cannot see any hands, any reactions, and no questions in the chat.
All right, well, that probably is an indication that we are ready for, I think, a needed break. So with that, again, thank you very much, Guillermo, muchísimas gracias, Gareth and Matthew. We hope that this has proven to be an interesting session, and indeed, we look forward to taking this workshop forward. So thank you all very much, and Hugo, back to you.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Escobar and Mr. Morgan. We are indeed a bit over time, but I think we will still have a 10-minute break, so a 12-minute break. I would suggest that everyone comes back at 2:50 p.m. And I apologize in advance for the moderator and speakers for the next session, but we will have this short break and see you all at 2:50 p.m. Thank you. Welcome back, colleagues. I hope you enjoyed the short break. Now, following the previous sessions that focused on building back better and better preparedness for resilience, this next session will focus on how to deliver an effective disaster response and facilitate early recovery. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Michel Matera to moderate this session. Mr. Matera is Lead Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the World Bank, and he is based in Abidjan. Michel, over to you.
Thank you, Hugo. Can you all hear me well?
We can hear you.
Excellent. So good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Michel Matera, as Hugo just introduced me. I'll be the moderator of today's session on delivering an effective disaster response and facilitating early recovery. Thanks, Eric, the team, for inviting me to moderate this session. So I'm currently based in Abidjan, but until a few weeks ago, I was based in Maputo, Mozambique, and I've spent most of my career working on DRM in the Southwest Indian Ocean region, where I've seen my share of disaster events, from cyclones and flooding to drought. So the purpose of today's session is to discuss the challenges in setting up, implementing, activating, managing emergency operations center or emergency response system. We are lucky to have two distinguished speakers to share with us their experience, and I hope they are connected. So I'll ask you, Hugo, to make sure that they are indeed connected. Our first presenter is Levent Gerda from Istanbul, Turkey. Levent is the program coordinator in the project coordination unit of the Istanbul Seismic Risk Mitigation and Preparedness Project. Welcome, Levent. So the project went into effect, I believe, in 2004, received funding from different financing institutions, including the World Bank. For more than a decade, the project helped improve the city of Istanbul's capacity for disaster and emergency management and to strengthen critical public facilities to better withstand the shock of earthquakes. So Levent is an electronics and telecommunication engineer by training, and he has more than 30 years of experience in designing ICT critical infrastructure and in building command control and coordination center. So Levent will give us a brief overview of the EOC facilities in Istanbul, and will talk about his experience in designing and implementing an effective emergency management system. So Levent, over to you. As a reminder, you have a max of 15 minutes for your presentation. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for the introduction. Today, my video presentation will be about EOC's exercise and drills in Istanbul. While the video is being displayed on the screen, I will talk about some details. Let me share my screen now. I hope you can see that, right?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. You see two big buildings here. The brownish building is this one is the 112 Center in Istanbul, and the other, the grayish one here, is the primary EOC of Istanbul, which is run by Istanbul Afad. Istanbul Afad is the emergency and disaster management agency for Istanbul. Istanbul Afad European side, this is the European side EOC, known as Hostel EOC, is designed and constructed by Istanbul Project Coordination Unit, which is originally a World Bank project implementation unit founded in February 2006, and is still operational with a total budget of 2.5 billion euros. As you can see, the EOC is located nearby a highway, which makes it easily accessible. For immediate access, the EOC has also a heliport on the left corner over here, which may be used by the public, high public officials like ministers, the governor, or the military staff. On the right, just over here, just over here, you will see 4 communication pylons, each of which is 50 meters high. The pylons are for communicating more than 150 public agency sites and organizations, like military command control room, police and gendarmerie stations, first responder agencies, and other public agencies which take part in disaster management cycle. On the rear of the building, EOC building here, there are technical rooms like gensets, transformers, AC, air conditioning units, fuel tanks, fire extinguishing infrastructure, etc. Just below the heliport here, there is a general purpose warehouse for the EOC. And the big parking lot is a must for the EOC because the EOC is designed for 550 simultaneous staff which need to operate together during a disaster or an exercise. This part of the footage has been shot during 2015 national exercise and drills held in Istanbul. The main meeting hall is furnished with modern ICT systems, including 4K and HD video and audio infrastructure. The EOC is capable of producing its own broadcast material for TV and radio broadcast during an emergency. To feed the media and its citizens with accurate and correct information is very important, especially during a disaster. There are 27 task groups for disaster management in Istanbul, which is described in Turkish Disaster Response Plan, which is abbreviated as TAM in Turkish. Istanbul TAM defines which task groups are composed of which public agencies and the leading public agency for the task group. Each task group knows which part of the EOC is reserved and dedicated for them. Each task group is equipped with necessary ICT equipment and stationery like flip charts, whiteboard markers, maps, etc. And this configuration is kept 7/24 all year round for all the task groups. Here you see different task groups working together, and these are the supervisor desks. So, for example, this one is a security and traffic task group. So this one is the CBRN task group. CBRN task group. This one is the data management, evaluation and supervision and monitoring task group. And this one is the resources management task group. The EOC is equipped with a data center to serve more than 1,000 staff with 1 gigabit per second LAN and Wi-Fi access with high cybersecurity procedures. All rack cabinets are earthquake resistant type and installed with firm fixture to the ground and ceiling. As you can see here, there are some fixtures on top of the rack cabinets. This is in case that the earthquake hits the data center, the rack cabinets do not fall. And here you see some yellow enforcements of the rack cabinets, which shows that it is an earthquake resistant rack cabinet. The EOC has a professional FM radio studio broadcasting a few days in a week and plan to operate continuously during disasters. The off-road communication truck and broadcasting vehicle are redundancy plans in case if the infrastructure fails in the EOC. So you see different kinds of special designed vehicles for use of Istanbul Afat. And this is the broadcasting vehicle that can broadcast conventionally or through the satellite. And this is a mini studio of the vehicle. The physical drills for urban search and rescue, water search and rescue, CBRN, and other disciplines are very important to see the deficiencies in the teams for inter-team or intra-team collaboration and coordination, equipment, and staff trainings. This is a CBRN drill, which trains the staff about cleaning the or decontaminating the stuff, clothing, vehicles, and the surrounding environment properly according to INSARAC CBRN decontamination guidelines. A patient is decontaminated and taken out of the warm area at the moment. This is Istanbul Search and Rescue Unit and Istanbul Afat Training Department campus in Yeşilköy, Istanbul, nearby the old Atatürk Airport. This is not a direct part of the hostile EOC, but it's very important to support professional Afat teams from other cities and Istanbul NGO search and rescue teams professional trainings. The campus has training rooms, shaking table for earthquake simulation for students and citizens, pool for professional divers, river and flood search and rescue emulator, and a professional canine unit. Akfrat, the Anatolian side EOC, is designed and constructed to replicate the European side EOC, and has the similar functionalities and the ICT infrastructure. This EOC is inside the Turkish Red Crescent Marmara region operational campus, which is also designed and constructed by Istanbul Project Coordination Unit. The campus is very close to the Sabiha Gökçen Airport and surrounding highways. Istanbul Project Coordination Unit support Istanbul AFAD with EOCs, search and rescue equipment, training campus, special design vehicles, and social projects like citizen disaster awareness trainings for the last 16 years, and will continue to support in the future. This is the data center from the Anatolian side EOC. And back of the EOC, you will see the Turkish Red Crescent other facilities. This is the EOC building. These are the communication pylons, and all the other facilities are belongs to Turkish Red Crescent. I would like to end my video presentation with Istanbul Project Coordination Unit's motto: we strengthen our future. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and listening to me. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Levent. Thank you for this. I mean, very impressive set of infrastructure. I think we've seen it in Istanbul, in other cities, for this type of state-of-the-art infrastructure, which is sometimes unlikely to be mobilized on a regular basis, right? Especially when you have to deal with a disaster event that you know, with a 1 in 100 year or more return period. So the importance of the simulation exercise and drills. So I think this is a key point that we saw also in your presentation. I have a few questions, but I wanted to invite colleagues to basically respond or comment or react to your presentation. So first, I would like to invite Mrs. Sama Uzwayo from eThekwini, please. Ms. Zama, can you hear us?
Good afternoon, colleagues. Zama Kuzayo from eThekwini municipality. For me, I think one of the most critical things is that I'm picking up is getting in terms of the infrastructure ready. Making sure that you have all the equipment that is there. And what is coming across between the presentation is that all stakeholders are including the involvement of communities when it comes to the drilling and prioritizing and, you know, sensitizing it to the level of communities to say that if it so happens that we have to deal with the situation, this is what you must expect. For me, it gives you know, the communities or the stakeholders an extent of understanding the depth or the seriousness of the issues and the risks that they are facing, but equally creates an awareness in terms of we must do better, we must plan better, we need to not to be complacent because we don't want to get to that level of distress. So some of these drills, they're not really getting prepared, but making them to avoid those situations in terms of practice, in terms of awareness in their surroundings. I think The other thing that I'm picking up is admitting as local government to say that we cannot do it all on our own. There are things that we cannot do and we cannot control, but we need to tap into the other stakeholders to get their input and their efforts to try and reduce or mitigate the risks that are around us. So it is very important that we do it as a collaboration and be having those governance structures that enable us to engage and share and practice as multi-stakeholders, not necessarily just us as local government trying to solve every problem, but we need to let go some of those things and understand that we cannot solve it all, and do engage where we have identified that as our own capacity as local government, this is how far we can go. You as a community, you as a private sector, you need to play your part, and we can walk through the journey, whether through preparedness, through planning, and actually making it easier when it's time to respond. We are already familiar with each other. We have done it through our planning. We have done it through our drills. So I'm taking that message as what has been presented currently.
Thank you very much, Jama. Very insightful comment. Maybe before we move to the second presenter, Leven, if you could react to that, right? So you showed us basically the logistical challenge of having the accessibility, the building that can host several people, stakeholders. Could you talk just in a minute, really, about this challenge of bringing people together, the different stakeholders, the community, more the human challenge? Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Actually, the usefulness of the EOC is, of course, the infrastructure is really important, but I find more important that it created a culture working together of the agencies, public agencies, beforehand, because our national response plan has been prepared something like 5 years ago. So till that time, actually, we didn't have a comprehensive national plan for response. So before that, the agencies actually know what to do, but I could not really say that it was a comprehensive working together culture. So actually, with these drills and exercises, everybody now knows in Istanbul, each public agency and each staff in the different public agencies, where to sit, what to do, what is the expectation, and what platforms to use, what kind of infrastructure they have, or what kind of collaboration or coordination they should have with other agencies and with other teams. So I think these drills, this is the really important and the positive outcome of these exercises and drills. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Leven. So time to move to our second speaker, who is Gerard Otto. Gerard is from Cape Town. He's currently the head of the disaster management and chairperson of the District Command Center of the Garden Route District Municipality. So Gerard is a DRM expert with a background in environmental health. He's been working for local government for over 30 years, and he led the establishment of the Garden Route Disaster Management Center in 2008. In his presentation, Gerard will tell us about his first-hand experience as a disaster management practitioner and in managing various disaster events with a focus on what worked well, what challenges were identified, and how they were addressed. So over to you, Gerard. Hope you can hear us.
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon, Michael, and all connected colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gerard, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Yes, Gerard, you can go ahead. And please be reminded that you have 15 minutes. Thanks.
I've got many slides, but I'm not going to speak to all of them. I'm just going to run through them quickly. Maybe just to start off, to just give you an idea of where we are. South Africa, the garden route is right on the south end there. And in my district, I've got 7 local municipalities. We call them local municipalities. And in this, we have got 621,000 people and 172,000 households. As a district center, you'll see on the screen here, the Garden Route District Municipality Center is connected to the Provincial Disaster Center, which then is also then aligned to our national center. So anything we do at a district level, we feed back the local municipalities information through province to national. At our district center, we do have a call center that takes all emergency calls, not as the one that we've seen by Levant. It's much smaller, but it does the job for us on a district level. It does about 26,000 calls per month on the EMS side. And then we've also got a JOC or MAC, the multi-agency command center. Now, having all this in place.
Sorry, it's
Yes.
Anthea Stevens here. Won't you put it onto full screen if you can? It's not coming across full. Just the.
Okay. Is that better?
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So in that multi-agency command center, next to the emergency call center, we take all the calls for the responding agencies and then provide them the where they have to go. So what we've done is we've got a disaster response plan, and before we activate our center, we actually try to include the mayor, the municipal manager, all heads of departments, and the head of the disaster center, who's myself. What we found is we don't do that. We don't get the collective buy-in of all the stakeholders, starting off with the disaster management center activation right in the beginning. We also have a district response plan. I'm going to forward to that, indicating the levels of response. If it's only a single agency response, it's a forward control point. If it's a multi-agency response, we say it's an incident command post. And our center actually only activates for incidents that is a level 3 response. We had all this in place, and we've discussed this with the responding agencies, and everyone knew what they're supposed to do. And then this happened in Eisner. We had the biggest fire in the district in the last 40 years. I think a total of 18,000 hectares burnt. And yeah, as you can see of the photos that's going to follow, this is the extent of that. The fire spread right through.
At least I'm able to unmute, yeah.
So the fire spread right from Eisner through to Plett, burning everything. We had about one house catching a fire, starting to burn per minute, and yeah, causing devastation right through that specific area in my district. But unfortunately, 7 lives lost, an estimated of 1,196 houses damaged, large forestry areas destroyed, numerous businesses destroyed, vast natural vegetation areas destroyed, a huge number of animals were killed or maimed, various engineering facilities damaged or destroyed at and around the town, the basic services. Many jobs were lost and many people were left without livelihood. And then we said, but listen, we need to tackle this in a different way. With the responding agencies, we're dealing with it excellently in terms of...
Look, it's unmute, but after some time, it's
sorry, managing the fires and putting the wet stuff on the red stuff. But when it came to the rebuild initiative, we realized we needed to take a different approach. And then we, from the Western Cape government side, the Premier called for the Garden Route Rebuild Initiative. It's to develop a shared vision and a strategy for rebuilding an economy and restoring livelihoods in the Garden Route district, and to coordinate all resources and efforts to achieve maximum impact. And what we then did is we developed various work streams, the humanitarian work stream, a reconstruction work stream, an environmental management work stream, a business support and skills development work stream, an infrastructure rehabilitation work stream, as well as a skills development work stream, and then cutting across of these with the funding, resource communication, and legal work stream. And these work streams all were then broken down into work groups, and these work groups were all provided specific assignments, and all of these work streams and work groups then had frequent meetings on specific days, and all of this fed back into how can we build back better in the specific area. And I must say, looking back onto what we've learned from this, it made the way forward much easier, because we could prioritize what were the urgent interventions needed. We could, from there, for each work stream, have a purpose, decide who the members would be, and also do some recommendations. And in the end, all of this came back into a, I'm going to go past these slides, into also involving outside agencies. We got funding from donators into helping and assisting us to rebuild, specifically in the garden route in the Knysna area. And what we've done is, from this, we also, lessons we've learned, we've pulled into coordination of the COVID pandemic. When the COVID pandemic struck, it was actually easy because some of the work stream people would say, listen, I was in the Knysna rebuild work stream for humanitarian assistance, and they actually activated themselves when we got to the COVID coordination. In the COVID coordination, we just called them clusters, and we had a health cluster, safety and security cluster, a social development cluster, transport cluster, business economy and tourism cluster, and media and communications. And many of these people we got to know through working on the Knysna fire, and they all knew what was expected from them, making it much easier. The only thing we did when we came to the coordination of the COVID pandemic, we added a hotspot strategy. Now, what we did is we actually plotted each COVID case in the district on a map, and that way we could see where more cases was notified, and more cases in specific areas. We could address those areas with our interventions, focusing on specific areas. And what we've said going forward is trying to use the same technology and principle in mapping, for instance, safety incidents, so that we know where to address our safety initiatives and safety projects. I want to get to, I think, a couple of my take-home messages. First of all, I think we need to establish predetermined parameters to trigger proactive activation. What I found is in many cases, your emergency operating center, your JOC or MAC will activate too late. And maybe the first responders, who's the fire and rescue services, they will respond, but the other stakeholders is not part of the initial activation. So we should maybe at some point get to that we identify predetermined parameters. Then we need to do proper capacity assessments at local municipal level. What I find is many of the local municipalities will provide you with a contingency plan, and many of them see a contingency plan as a disaster management plan. But what I always say is, don't provide me a plan, because what I've seen is many of these plans are copy and paste exercises. I would rather like to see, show me how you implement the plan. Show me in terms of a tabletop exercise, how are you going to roll out what you've put in paper? In the civil defense era, we had a star grading for municipalities. Sometimes feel we must get back to that to test if the local municipalities can do what the plan says they are going to do. And then what I've also seen is, after the COVID pandemic and everyone is returning back to their normal ways of life, some officials are stepping back into the comfort of their own silo and not becoming part of the bigger picture and trying to build resilience in each of the local municipal areas. Then I would also like to see us cut red tape to fast-track response. Currently, for disaster rehabilitation reconstruction, we've got about 3, maybe 4 verification processes. Either first up by the line department, then by the district municipality disaster center with province, and then by the NDMC. Sometimes in times of flooding, we get the assistance a year later. So if we could cut the verification process in some way, it will help a lot. Secondly, to unlock international assistance. What we saw during the Knysna fire disaster is there was a lack of capacity to deal with donation management. If we could get assistance from Red Cross, etc., in those times, specifically in the beginning, it would have helped quite a lot. And then we need to find ways to beef our funding towards building resilience. We know what needs to be done, but we don't have the financial backing to get this in place. In the garden route, for example, we know that invasive alien plants is our #1 risk. Not only does it pose a very high threat in fire risk, but it also sucks up our water and inhibits our wetlands to work properly as natural barriers against flooding events. To eradicate this, we need 200 million rand. Up till today, after the Knysna fires, after the following George fires, and where we are now, we have not received funding to that regard, and it still remains a challenge for us to address that going forward. I think many of our disaster management centers and disaster management practitioners have got The level 3 disaster plan for this country indicates actually disaster risk reduction. But to get funding towards addressing that, that is the problem. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerhard, for your presentation, your insights, the very long list of challenges. I understand the financing one is something that will be discussed in tomorrow's session, very important indeed. I would like to now invite Billy Barnes from, I'm not going to pronounce this very well, so I'm going to skip the pronunciation of the metro area, but Billy Barnes, if you're connected, if you could react to Gerhard's presentation, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sister Janet. How are you, ma'am, on this cold, wet day?
Hello.
Hello. It's Billy here from Mangaung Metro.
Hi, Billy. Please go ahead.
If I may, can I please just first give a little bit of a comment on Istanbul's infrastructure, what we see. I must say, for a major city, Istanbul, the infrastructure clearly shows us the approach of multi-sectoral participation with regard for, let's say, instance, smooth planning, monitoring, and also your response situations. If especially the monitoring and the communication information are readily available in such an infrastructural building for emergency responses, it's just an ideal situation that is being created there. We, and I'm not talking about South Africa, not even on a national level, we cannot even showcase such. But like Gerhard just said, we have smaller disaster management centers. Even Mangaung has its own, with its own challenges and shortcomings. But it's really a lesson to learn that your infrastructure, as I've seen, also streamline and ensure that our responses can be effectively and also timeously to the communities that are affected. With regard to Mr. Otto's presentation, for sure, I think our focus should be on proactive activation and on mitigation and prevention processes rather than the response. We need disaster risk management must take its place on preparedness, like what we are saying here is to build resilience within the communities. One issue that is really lacking in our area is the lack of participation from NGOs, business entities, and also the community at large. And then one of the biggest issue is you're buying from political principles so that they can actually finance correctly for us efficiently according to the framework, and also like your 0.5% per your budget allocations, which is currently not there, but we will talk about that tomorrow. But thank you for the lessons that I've seen, and really it's nice to see that in the world out there are actually much better coordination, participation, especially when you look at the drills that you've showcased to us. Thank you very much for that, Levent. I will stand off by that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Billy. I don't know, Eric, colleagues, if there's time for a question from the colleagues connected. I also saw a lot of questions on the chat addressed to Levent, and Levent, thank you very much for all your answers. So I'm just seeking now my colleagues if there's time for one or two questions for the people connected. Eric, Hugo, do we have time, or are we up?
Thanks, Michelle. I can see that that Matthew from Nelson Mandela Bay has his hand up, so that would be great to hear from Matthew again. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you again for the opportunity. And this conference is not just about sort of deciding where our problems lie and where we can improve. but it's also committing to actions moving forward of how we could simply just do better, learning from the international community. And one of the big things I want to take away from Gerard's presentation is he makes a very valid point about, you know, we need some sort of funding model available from a national side, whereby a local authority can present a business case showing the cost to, say, implement a solution versus the cost of reacting to a disaster. The invasive vegetation for a fire risk is a classic example. You know, I'm not saying, you know, we must just have a disaster, then beg for funds to resolve it. I'm saying, you know, we evaluate probability, risk, severity, and we say, here's a clear case where if we invest 10 million now, we will save 1 billion in damages through a high risk or probability of something occurring. And yeah, valuable input. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you very much, Matthew. I don't see any other hands up. So I guess
we just had a new hand up, Michelle, from Mr.
Okay, sorry, from Clinton. Clinton Manuel, please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Gerard. I haven't spoken to you in a while. And I think Gerard touches on a few very important things. And maybe if one can explore it from a different perspective. The issue, for instance, of alien vegetation clearing. Consider that South Africa embarked on a working for water program, a working on fire program, and particularly the working on fire program, where in that Gardenwood district, your fuel load is extremely high. But the funding goes to different agencies. It's not that there's no funding. And that agency then established themselves as a, you can call it a primary or a secondary response to fires, and not really dealing with the issue, for instance, of cutting fire breaks, clearing alien vegetation, etc., etc., etc. But if, like Gerard is saying, if that funding goes to the proper place and it's administered properly to address the risk identified in those districts, then one could possibly see a more positive outcome coming out of that. The second thing I need to comment on is that if you particularly take a metro and you take a district and you take a local authority. Now, during that Naasda fire, I was the chief fire officer there. And Naasda is a very small municipality which falls in the district that Gerard is responsible for. And the collaboration between the B municipalities was very important. But also maybe it's time that in the South African context, the decision get made, where does these functions lie? Is it on a district level? Is it on a provincial level? If one look at a metro can capacitate and organize themselves far better because the area is big versus an area like the Garden Route, where you have 7 different municipalities and you've got a district. So the organizing is fragmented. It's almost like what we heard yesterday, herding cats. So one need to look at these dynamics that actually play a big role in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clinton. So I don't see any other hands up. So thank you very much for your comments, all of you, and also thanks to Levent and Gerard for their important and interesting presentation. I'll hand it over back to my colleagues Eric and Hugo, and wish you a good continuation of workshop. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Michelle, and many thanks also to Mr. Otto and Mr. Dan for your interesting presentations. So this has provided a very useful background for the next session, which will be, like yesterday, focusing on group discussions in breakout rooms. Just wanted to let you know that this time breakout rooms are going to be organized by thematic areas. So for Metro delegates, you will be shortly asked to join the breakout room that you have been allocated to. You should have received an email this morning outlining which breakout room you have been assigned to. But I will also display the list shortly, so you can see if you have which breakout room you have been assigned to if you have not seen the email. And for those who are not part of metro groups, you will be able to freely choose a breakout room based on your area of expertise or interest. Like yesterday, I would also like to remind you about a few technical aspects for the session. My colleague, Paul, will shortly explain the objectives of the session. And once he's done, please join the breakout sessions by clicking on the breakout room icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you cannot see it, you can click on the icon named More, and it should be listed there. And like yesterday, the breakout room will expire automatically at the end of the session, and you will be automatically brought back into the plenary room. So with that, I will now pass the floor to my colleague, Paul, who will explain the way forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hugo, and welcome everyone back to a really interesting and interactive afternoon now, where you get to discuss some of the challenges in a little more detail. Yesterday, we had our discussions in metro groups, so there were multi-agency, multi-sectoral discussions, but in your own local metro group, where we looked at a range of challenges broken down into one of the 5 ready-to-respond components. Now, all of the comments and your group outputs have been recorded, and we've got those for our future use, and they've also helped to shape the questions which you'll discuss today. But what's becoming evident is that there are some challenges where we might make improvements by simply adopting best practices already in place, and whether that's in South Africa or, as we've learned from the excellent speakers today, from international case studies. So we may not need to reinvent anything. We may simply be able to look to existing good practices and see how we can adopt those locally. Some challenges are going to require further and collaborative input from stakeholders across a number of sectors, potentially across different spheres of government, before we can fix them. So we need to find a way of how can we bring together the appropriate stakeholders, and how should we structure those discussions to enable answers to be found. And there are some challenges which will undoubtedly require some element of policy or legislative changes, so that the proposals that you make can be enacted in accordance with the law. So today you're going to break into one of 6 focus groups, where you'll be led by your facilitator through a small number of questions, between 3 and 5 or so, depending on the group that you're in. And in relation to each question, we're going to ask you to consider, are there existing good practices in South Africa that might be adopted more widely? Or are there existing professional groups or forums that we could task with development of common solutions? And don't forget, today, in the very short time we have, we're not trying to come up with the detailed solution to every question. We're identifying who should we give the question to so that they can work on that answer on our behalf. If we don't have any existing good practices, if there aren't any current collaboration groups who we could give the problem to, we'd like your advice about the kind of membership of a practitioners group that could be tasked with finding the solution. And finally, in relation to each of the questions you get, if there are any policy or legislative issues that need to be addressed, we'd ask you to identify those so that we can report them. Now, given that we are slightly over time again, and we want to get a fast-moving discussion, at the end of the session, we'll ask you to look at the questions that you've answered and prioritize them, and select just 2 of those answers to feed back in the plenary session at the end of the day. Now, don't worry, all of your answers will be captured by the facilitators, and we'll keep them for the record of the workshop. But when you feedback, we want you to prioritize the questions you've answered and report back on just 2 of those. So with that, I'll hand back over to Hugo, who will direct you now to your breakout rooms. And I'm going to pop in and out of some of those rooms, and look forward to discussing with you in those breakout sessions. Thank you. Hugo.
Thank you, Paul. So I have now displayed a table with the names of the metros and then the assignment of your breakout rooms. So I will just, it's quite a long list, so I will just go up and down and slowly. And if you could just join the room that you have been allocated to, then please go ahead. Are there any questions? Please let me know, just unmute and let me know if you have any questions on your breakout room. I'm just
sorry, Paul, please can you repeat that? I mean, Hugo.
I am just asking if there are any questions about the breakout room allocation. I'm just going through the document again. I can't see the number of participants now because I'm sharing my screen, but just let me know if you have questions.
Yeah, we're still showing 34 participants in this screen, so we'd ask everyone now to move over to their breakout room and start the discussions there.
Hugo, I'm wondering if there's a challenge for people to get themselves to the breakout rooms. If they could put a note in the chat and we can move them ourselves, that might be difficult. So if somebody wants to go to a particular breakout room and they're not sure how to get there, put a note into the chat and we can move you across. Otherwise, we may move you automatically and randomly. So please shout if you need help.
Once again, I just wanted to make sure that you are have understood correctly. So if you're a part of a metro, I'm just showing the list of the breakout rooms that you have been assigned to. If you are not part of a metro, you can just join any session that you like based on your interests or your area of expertise. I can see there are still 20 participants, so do let me know if you have any issues in joining the breakout rooms, either in the chat or unmute yourself and just let me know. Or if you are from a specific metro area and you can't see it on the list, just let me know I can go back up and show your relevant metro. I will now stop sharing my screen, but if you have any specific question on the assignment, please do let me know.
Being recorded.
Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had good discussions. I am now asking my colleague Paul to continue moderating this next session and on the feedback of the breakout rooms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Hugo. And can I add my thanks to all of the participants? I flicked in between a number of the discussions today, and I'm only sorry that I couldn't visit all of them because I wanted to jump in and have some discussions with you. So it was good to see so many useful and fruitful discussions taking place. But to allow us to finalize the day, we'd like to now capture some of the feedback from each of those groups. Nothing that you've said today will be lost or has been wasted. That's captured by the facilitators. But can we briefly have some feedback from each of the groups in turn? I'll call you forward as we go. And can you keep your feedback as brief as you can and concentrate not on describing the problem, but rather on describing the solutions that you arrived at within your group in terms of, are there any best practices? Are there any existing groups we could give this challenge to? What groups should we establish if there are none already? And does this require any kind of policy or legal changes? So could I ask a representative from the first group, which was discussing community risk sensitization and capacity building? So who's providing feedback from that group, please?
Good day, Chair. I've been asked to. It's Owen Becker. I've been asked to. I'm not going to put my camera on. I'm just going to quickly run through it. We managed to get through 3 of the questions that were posed to us. The first one is, there are a number of programs in place about community awareness and education, and most of the organizations are running them. But what is important that they need to be focused on the risks faced by those communities. Then in terms of the disaster management legislation and policy framework, that is very clear on education and training, but there seems to be a lack of understanding. So there needs to be a lot more understanding of what is actually in the legislation, because it's covered to a large extent. And then the universities, there's a big gap in the availability of tertiary education for disaster managers. The programs at the moment are not adequately covering that, and that should include things like the indigenous knowledge that's there. Then that was the first question. Then the second one around the emergency shelters. The walls themselves are not socially acceptable because you've got a mix of people. There is a standard called the Sphere program that provides a very detailed, but the problem is that there's insufficient capacity and funding to fully implement that. To look at things like temporary relocation areas, and do those in advance, whatever the feasibility is. And again, the responsibility of sector departments to do their planning and budgeting in terms of the disaster legislation. And then finally, the question around early warnings. The South African Weather Service has got an early warning system, but there needs to be better collaboration with disaster management so that we can take it to specific communities. And again, it must be based on the risk associated with that, and it should be triggered by certain indicators. So whether it's a drought or a flood, how that would be. And then other options that can be explored are electronic billboards like Sanrail have got, the use of technology like your social media, and the need to educate and create awareness with people. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That was brilliant. And thank you so much as well for helping us keep to time. So with that, I'll move on to our next group. And who's feeding back from information management? In Judy's group.
Thank you, Paul. That would be me. We managed to go over 4 out of the 5 questions, but the main highlights that I would like to perhaps discuss here or outline here is that first, on effective sharing of information across boundaries and the metros and different levels of government. In the group, we discussed that there's the province is working on something, working on a system that would interlink between the various metropolitan areas, and the province would be in charge of this. And then the second point we discussed was on the inventory. Different metropolitan areas are actually have inventories of equipment, capabilities, and assets, though at the localized level. So, but in future, there would need to be a system that would consolidate those efforts such that when you need to have a response that's at a higher level or cross-boundary, then you know what resources and capabilities exist across boundaries. Then with the private sector and with other NGOs, I think there's a province or two that indicated they actually have SLAs signed and MOUs. So this is something that perhaps could be encouraged as a good practice for other metropolitan areas. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Judy. And moving on swiftly to training and exercising. Who's providing feedback from training and exercising?
Hi, Paul. That will be me, Clinton.
Hi, Clinton.
Yeah, so we had quite an interesting session with Lorena. Thank you, Lorena. Issue 1, the common training standards for disaster response. And a lot of our discussion centered around risk assessments that must be done that will inform the training to be conducted. We also came to the conclusion that we must avoid duplication. And for instance, within the city of Cape Town, where the discussion was mainly around, is that you have disaster risk management doing their standards of training. You have fire department who become a lead agency, then should there be a nuclear fallout. And we said that we must avoid at all times to duplicate the kind of service that we render, because duplication always results in wastages. The second one is that the SOPs and operational guidance, and between different departments, and this is confirmed with the entire group, doesn't matter where you're from, everybody has got a good SOP and they've got good guidelines in place, but we've got no collaboration between the different agencies or departments who respond to an emergency. And it obviously leads to a duplication of responses. And the solution we came up there was that the training heads, you find there's a training head in fire, in disasters management, metro police, in traffic and law enforcement. Those are the ones who must form a committee and unpack these SOPs and to ensure that there's collaboration, so that we can also start training and doing exercises, mixing people up, people from fire, people from metro police, etc., and then do training, regular exercises on that, so we understand one another's SOPs and response guidelines. On the third one, with ICS, organizing and assessments, the City of Cape Town, we're extremely fortunate in this regard, where the City of Cape Town, we hold the IFSAC certification for ICS training. So what we're doing in the Western Cape, not only in the City of Cape Town, we permit other fire services to train their own staff, and then there will be an exercise, and during that exercise, we evaluate in the different roles, planning section chief, or whatever role the person falls in. And the Fire Training Academy does that assessment, but that is also being done in our own city, where we're rolling out ICS training, and then everybody will be trained to the same standard, everybody will be assessed on the same standard, and everybody will then be certified. Doing it that way ensures that it's one agency who actually hold the capacity to assess and to certificate people within our province and within our own city. Thank you.
Thanks. And again, I really like those last comments that you made, that you already have a system which is really robust and working already. So is that something we could adopt and spread elsewhere? So that's great. So moving us on then to Eric's group with effective coordination between the different spheres of government. Who's providing that feedback?
That's a great question, Paul. We got so deep into the conversation that I frankly, I overlooked asking for a rapporteur, but I see that Esther put and Levant seconded a very important observation in the chat about the location of disaster management, DMCs, whether it's a ministry, etc., into the chat. And I'm wondering, Esther, if I could invite you on the spot just to come in and give some quick reactions. If not, I'm very happy to do it on behalf of the group, but I think it would be lovely to have a voice from Tshwane come in on this. Esther?
Thanks, Eric. Can you hear me? Yeah, I think it was just a follow-up from what my colleagues said in terms of being placed at the right point someone said in our group that you cannot be placed in a dark spot somewhere in a passage and expect to be visible. I think it's just to add to that even if you're placed right, but we don't have the right reporting channel from national all the way down, then it's not gonna serve a purpose. Thanks.
Thanks for that observation, and I have to share the view that you have, because even here in the UK we have a similar system. We don't actually have a national disaster authority, but the responsibility for coordination sits with the Cabinet Office, working to the Prime Minister, and in that way they have the convening power. They don't have to do all of the work, but they hold the convening power to coordinate all of the other line ministries. Where the disaster management function sits just in another line ministry, it's very hard for them to coordinate their counterparts when everyone is sat at the same level. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does make the job harder.
And maybe, Paul, just to complement with one other point that came up a number of times in Group 4 was around consistency in data systems, so that we don't have different metros using different systems. And Levant really also illuminated the system that they use in Turkey, which is accessible at all levels of government, using the same data portals, and is visible in real time, so that the decision making can be made on a singular unified set of information. So that was one other significant point that came up in a number of different ways during our discussion. Thanks very much, Esther, for coming in. Appreciate it.
Did we have any particular comments, Eric, just before we move on, about the differences between formally declared and not formally declared disasters and major emergencies, and whether or not there's a role for the different spheres of government to be involved in emergencies that are not yet disaster? Because the South African legislation creates a cliff edge until those declarations are made.
We did discuss that, and unfortunately, it does seem, I stand corrected, so participants, please do come in, but that because of the legislation and the way that it's crafted, for the provincial level to come in at the local level on an emergency doesn't seem feasible, and doesn't unlock the resources that the province would be able to bring to bear if a disaster was declared. But I do stand on correction. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're picking up, because tomorrow we're looking also at some of the legal and institutional aspects. So I'm sure we can pick that up there. So a really slightly different question, although many of the same challenges, but moving over to my colleague Darman, who was looking after effective coordination at the metro and local levels, and who's responding back from that group, please?
Thank you, Paul. I think it was very interactive discussion, and Johan will be reporting from the group. And if he need to be assisted, I think Bafana will come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Paul. Darman's group. Just a few points. We are in dire need of an agreed national incident management system, which will be quite useful. There are draft regulations on it and so on, but we do need to implement something like that, and it needs to be socialized to the lowest level. But what is important about it is that it must be easy to engage with from non-emergency services. People who don't have 2 weeks to go sit in the incident command system course. They need to be able to easily engage with this national incident management system, and be useful for them. I think there's an agreement about much more exercises and training on this, so that the coordination will be better. We spoke about professional networks. We spoke about the disaster management advisory forums that is in May at the municipal level, and can be at provincial and national level as well. But the challenge is that metros that are in this call don't get the opportunity to talk to each other really at the national level, which was quite nice, is quite nice at the moment. We mentioned the Disaster Management Institute of Southern Africa, which is a professional body and a community of practice for disaster management in South Africa, which could be a place or a channel through which to promote a common national language on incident management. The concept of centers of excellence was mentioned, where for different hazards. So, for example, in Cape Town, we do not get the kind of floods that our colleagues in eThekwini get, and we would definitely be able to learn a whole lot from them about flooding. So that concept of centers of excellence was mentioned. The discussion about who should lead a national incident management system development, we thought that when it comes to an all hazard multi-agency coordination system, the Disaster Management Act really makes it clear that disaster management should be coordinating that in terms of all hazard and not only a specific collection of hazards. And then mutual aid agreements, very important in terms of collaboration between municipalities. The need to call the same things, the same names in terms of communication at the national level, and maintaining common operational pictures and situational awareness. Then levels of incidents to be defined from a minor incident, as Gerard showed in his presentation. That's quite important, and we need to agree to that. And then lastly, in terms of interoperability, we just noted that the online collaboration platforms went very far in terms of improving interoperability during the COVID-19 within South Africa. But unfortunately, yes, they are dependent on connectivity. And then we spoke a bit about radio trunking and how in certain areas there's wide coverage of different services on the same system. And although they have the capacity to talk to each other, different disciplines talk to each other, they don't actually do it. And maybe that's something we should be learning about, but it just seems as if it's not happening, and it has to do with lines of communication, lines of and unity of command. So thank you. Those are a few points from our side.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And obviously, we look forward to receiving from all of the groups the much more detailed notes that our facilitators have been taking. And last but by no means least is a report back from the Finance and Resources Group. And I understand it's Matthew from NMB that's going to provide this. And the question everybody else is asking, Matthew, is where's the money? So perhaps you can tell us what you learned in your group. Hi, Matthew.
Thanks again. Hi. Sorry, I'm the sucker who seems to be reporting back every time.
We found out you had a good set of headphones and we keep picking on you.
So probably the more important topic to discuss, because it's clear that without money, there's not much we can actually do. So we have 5 major points that I've kind of put together. One is whatever is done, it needs to be driven from a higher level, preferably from a national level, so that it can filter down to provincial and to local. If it's made at a local level in one local sphere, it will be very unpopular with the rest because it conflicts. So driven from a national perspective. The need for more funding, we need to talk about how we're going to get that. If it's going to be nationally sourced, we need to talk about, reserving a portion of our GDP, or perhaps increasing VAT or income tax so that there can be funds made available. A good example is like the road accident fund, where a fuel levy is put aside, and it's most importantly, it's ring-fenced. That's a key word for us. It must be ring-fenced. If it's sourced locally, we can look at like a special levy, but again, I think that would be very politically unpopular. Point 3 was that these funds that are ring-fenced mustn't only be for the implementation of projects, but they must also be used to have perhaps hire a specialized national team that can be deployed to these disaster areas to help in implementing the solution. Locally, we're not really at a capacity place where we can actually do it ourselves. We can deal with our internal disasters, like I've had a pump trip recently, an hour ago, but I can't deal with no water to an entire city. It's just too much to take on locally. The 4th point is that to develop sort of a task team from a national level that's brought down to also oversee the procurement thereof. There's clear that we can't, even if we get the funds, we can't, you know, have accelerated or emergency procurement of resource from an auditor general. So we need someone who comes with the authority to deviate from the norm and deal with a disaster. If a bomb is dropped on PE today, I can't wait for it to be evaluated if it is a disaster and then apply a business case funding. I need to deal with it now without fear of recourse. And then the last point is about sort of legislative consequences, you know, to sort of show proof that planning's been made. So when there is a big disaster, you know, we can't always prove that we've done what needed to be done to mitigate the risk, but we can prove that we thought about it. And at a high level, locally, perhaps, there must be some accountability for proof that there's been some thought or plans put in place. And those are our points.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. And thank you for summarising them so well. So the look forward to tomorrow, and we hope we can all join us again. Bring all of your friends that couldn't make it today back from your metros. Tomorrow, apart from the great input from the speakers, tomorrow afternoon's breakout session is going to really concentrate now on how do we make all those good points you've made today deliver in practice. So tomorrow we're looking at how we can enhance our collaboration, and we'll be working again in metro teams tomorrow to consider and make some of those final recommendations, which will then be discussed by our panel at the end of the day. But with that, can I thank all of you? I'll thank you for helping us to catch up on at least some of the time that we've gone over. And I'm handing back to Hugo to formally close proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And on behalf of the team, I would like to thank speakers, moderators, facilitators, but also more importantly to participants for your contributions today. As Paul mentioned, we have nearly made up on time, and I wanted to thank the previous speakers for their very efficient feedback on the breakout rooms. We have a very exciting day again tomorrow for the third and final day of the workshop. I will pull up the slides now for the agenda for tomorrow. So we will have the opportunity to confirm the identified common challenges and best practices and collaboratively find ways to enhance collaboration on emergency preparedness and response. And we will have a mix of sessions. So we'll start firstly with a few sessions to identify challenges and potential solutions for strengthening coordination on EP&R at multiple levels, with a specific focus on financing for disaster response. We will also have an interview with the London School of Economic Cities Executive Director, Dr. Philip Rose, on emergency governance. And then after that, we will have another set of breakout sessions, as Paul mentioned, where we will be again organized by metros to discuss good practices and address common challenges in the future. So in terms of housekeeping, we will have again the same link, the same Zoom link for tomorrow's meeting. Thank you again for today, and I really look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, and I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Good afternoon.
Thanks, everyone. See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks. Goodbye.